everyone, my name is Kayla and welcome back to Kay's Hidden Shelf, where we talk about books. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my review for Different Not Damaged by Andy Peloquin. This is a short story anthology featuring 6 short stories that are slice of life. They feature plenty of action, some emotional damage, morally gray characters, and some dark circumstances. Needless to say, this was a phenomenal read. I absolutely loved it, and I'm going to tell you why. Now, each of these stories follows a different character in the world of Aramis, which is a world that the author created in their Dark Blade series. Now, I only found out recently that this author has written 45 books to date. That's incredible, and it really shows in these short stories. One of the reasons why I love this so much is that it is hard for anyone, let alone even an author, to try and capture everything that is compelling, action, character-driven story, make the reader feel emotionally involved in a short page count. Typically, it's hard to do in a novella, let alone short stories that are somewhere between 10 and 30 pages each. That is phenomenal, and Andy Peloquin definitely pulls it off with each of these stories. I will say that there are some personal favorites that have stuck with me versus ones that didn't stick as much but were still quite impactful. That being said, they're all well executed and masterfully written. They pulled me in easily. I was entranced by the storytelling and by each of these characters' plights. Just for an example, I want to share the taglines really quick for the stories that did stick out to me most. The first being A Voiceless Child Painting Visions of Death. That one was heartbreaking. All of them are probably going to be heartbreaking, but that one in particular was quite emotional. We have a young man. I read him as a young man versus a child, but maybe that's just my own reading experience. But this was an individual who was gifted the ability to foresee deaths and paint them by their god. The problem is that he physically, he can't verbalize what's going to happen, and he has no means by which to stop these deaths or prevent them. And when he paints these images of the deaths to come, only he can see them. Everyone else only sees black. You can imagine how incredibly frustrating that is. Regardless, the story that follows is incredible and has stuck with me very close to my heart. The next one was A Priestess Divinely Empowered to Absorb Others' Pain. That one was just gutting. I have a hard time, and I can't even say it without spoiling anything, but I have a hard time with a particular trope that authors like to take with a female main character, let's just say that in particular, just because there's often very trope heavy or cliche ways of doing it. And again, I don't want to spoil anything because I truly think this is worth reading for yourself. But I really feel that Andy did a fantastic job at executing it without feeling trope heavy. He conveyed so many emotions that were really relatable in ways, and it just made me feel for the character. And can you imagine making the sacrifice to absorb others' pain? You feel that. That's there with you, and you make that sacrifice on top of the circumstances this character is already going through. Really well done. Another one that stood out was A Soldier Fighting for Courage in the Face of Fear. This one explores on PTSD and the after effects on a soldier who has experienced war and what can happen to them when they try to live a life of peace. All of that was really well captured. I think he did a phenomenal job with this one as well. I really felt for the main character, and it was hard to put this one down. I even reread that one twice because I loved it that much. That one in particular is also packed with action and great fight scenes. So if you are looking for a emotionally driven story with that action still, that's one to check out. And finally, the last one that stood out to me most was A Broken Warrior Priest on a Mission for Vengeance. That one, again, you have a strong but broken character. You have a character who is seeking vengeance for they believe injustices done to them, despite the fact that there's not a whole lot that they can do. They still go through with this plan of vengeance. And what happens is just incredibly moving in many ways, not just how the vengeance works out, but in terms of how other aspects of their life throughout all of that planning are impacted as well. And I won't say any more than that because anything more would be spoilers, but yes, those are the main stories that stood out to me most while reading this. Again, the others were still quite impactful, but you can really tell how much thought and care was put into all of these stories for them to be so well executed in a short page count. The effortless delve that it was for each of the stories to get invested in the characters' vulnerabilities, both physical and mental, because this looks at disabilities in both aspects. All of these characters have a weakness, a vulnerability of some kind, and the world is not kind to them. Their choices may or may not help them, but the world is ready to break them down. And like I said, this still covers some heavier themes in a masterful way with each of these characters, from PTSD, vengeance, guilt, the impacts of inaction, and sacrifice and loss. In terms of how I read this, I ended up buying the ebook and the audiobook to immersion read it. And about halfway through, I ended up chatting with the author online. I believe it was TikTok of all places. And they actually offered to send a physical copy over for me for my shelf and to continue reading, which was incredibly generous. So thank you, Andy, for sending the physical copy my way to review and continue reading. And I'm honestly going to reread this again, despite the fact that when he did send this, I stopped reading the short stories. I stopped listening to the audiobook and I waited. I waited until this got here and I started it over. So I reread the first half of this twice because I enjoyed it so much. And honestly, I look forward to rereading these stories again just because they've still stuck with me. I absolutely love them. And they are really ones that, while they are emotionally damaging, they are emotionally damaging in the absolute best way possible. So all of that to say, if you are looking for a short story collection that has emotionally impactful scenes, morally great characters, gives voice to those who are suffering in silence, and still has action, a grim, dark world, that fantasy feel to it, this is definitely one to pick up. Now, this won't be my last read by Andy Peloquin either because I am thoroughly impressed and I want to see what else this author can do. And like I said, he's written 45 books, so I better start reading. I also want to show off the cover for this because it is just phenomenal. It looks stunning. The artwork, the colors, the design, all of it is so well done. So huge kudos to the cover artist as well for doing such an incredible job. If you have a recommendation for another short story collection that deals such incredible emotional damage, by all means, please leave them in the comments below. I would love to check them out. And I would love to know, is this something you're interested in picking up too? As always, thank you so much for watching, everyone, and take care of yourselves.